Former Governor Ehrlich has repeatedly said that you have imposed the largest tax increase in the history of the state. Can you walk us through 2007 when the taxes were it was necessary to
Sure.
increase taxes, what the country was facing at the time, and what do you think, could Ehrlich have done anything different to handle that situation? And why were the tax increases necessary?
The tax increases were necessary because Bob Ehrlich left a bigger deficit than any governor in history after increasing state spending by more than any governor in Maryland history over a 4-year period of time, and after being one of the more ineffective governors we've ever had in modern history. 3 out of the 4 budgets he signed blew right by spending affordability limits. He made it a habit, I think 2 of the budgets that he introduced, even with the power to introduce the budget and make the tough choices up front, as we have done, every one of our budgets has been submitted as within spending affordability. 2 of the budgets that he put in, he told everybody, yes, we can all eat cake and lose weight, and then he gave it to the legislature to let them be the bad men and women that would have to make the cuts in ways that I think are not as effective as the executive standing up saying these are the priorities we're protecting, these are the things we have to cut in order to balance the budget. So he left us a bigger hole than any governor had been left in decades and decades. It was a $1.7 billion deficit, and we had to attack it right away. We did that through a combination of cuts, which actually we did more in cuts and decoupling hyperinflationary kickers that have been built into various formulas for good causes, but were unrealistic in these times, that would have certain budget amounts inflated, going up annually regardless of whether the governor proposed it or the legislature proposed it, regardless of whether there was money for it. So we did a combination of cuts. We also did a number of things on the revenue side. 4 of them primarily in terms of attacking the structural deficit. One was we had the 42nd lowest sales tax in the country, and so we raised that by 1 penny from 5 cents to 6 cents. We now have, our sales tax now ranks about 32nd in the country, because unlike other states, we don't have local county or municipal sales taxes, with rare exceptions like for the hotel room tax. So we moved, that was 1 penny, and that generated about $750 million, which was a big part of closing that gap. We offset the impact of that by lowering income taxes for 85% of Maryland families, and lowering them most dramatically for lower earning people, senior citizens on fixed incomes, by doing a couple of things. We increased by 25% the earned income tax credit, and we also increased the personal exemption, the amount of the personal exemption. So as a net result of those 2 actions, the progressive income tax, where we also asked millionaires and higher earning people to pay a little more, we saw that we actually lowered taxes for 41% of Maryland ratepayers with the combination of those 2 actions. We also raised our corporate income tax by 1%. Sent a third of that was dedicated to higher education and creating the first dedicated funding for higher education, which was helpful in our going 4 years in a row without a penny's increase in college tuition. We also sent a third of that 1% increase to Transportation Trust Fund in an effort to diversify that off of simply the flat gas tax. And so those were primarily the 3 things we did, and that's why we did it. When Bob Ehrlich was elected in easier times, even though he promised all of us that he would save us money and cut our taxes, he actually increased state spending by 33% compared to our 3% decline in state spending over 4 years, and he raised 30 different fees and tolls. He was the only governor since 1982 to increase the state's portion of the property tax, and he jacked up college tuition by 40%. And he always looked for ways to cut education, most notably by not funding GCEI or making any attempt to fund GCEI. And his second blow to Maryland Progress was when he reduced our investment in the construction of new classrooms and renovated classrooms. He reduced school construction funding to lower amounts than his predecessor, Paris Glendening, even in easier times, which is why we're so proud of the fact that we could come together, maintain our AAA bond rating, one of only 8 states to do it, and yet increase by 50% what we invest in school construction.
There's been a lot of talk about the climate for businesses in Maryland being as bad as it is in New Jersey, overtaxed New Jersey, and the report now is that with these new taxes, Maryland is sort of risen to the level of the overtaxation that exists in New Jersey. Do you think that is harmful for businesses, or how have you managed to try to offset the increases?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that go into creating a good business climate, especially for this new economy that we are, that change in our national economy, our global economy. There's going to be winners and going to be losers, and having a good business climate in order to take advantage of the new jobs and new opportunities of the new economy is more complicated than simply state's tax rate. Some of those studies that look at only tax rate are very stuck in their ideological opinion, not borne out by facts, that the lower the tax rate, the more job creation. And it's just not true. If you look at some of the states that they say are great for business because they have lower tax rates, you will see much higher unemployment than what we have in Maryland. We have one of the lower rates of unemployment in the country. I think Virginia's is 7.1. I think ours is 7.3 of late. So far this year, we're creating jobs faster than our neighbors in Virginia. So far this year, even with some months up and some months down, or some months up and some months, even with the ebb and flow here, so far this year, we've had the best year of net new job creation that we've had since the year 2000. Our rate of job creation is twice the nation's rate of job creation. And foundations that closely track this shift in our economy, this change to an innovation economy, knowledge-based economy, those are the reports that I put more stock in. I mean, when we looked at the revenue changes in the special session, we did look at competitiveness, though, Doug. I mean, when we looked at a lot of these reports look at only the highest rate. And what they don't factor in, for example, on the corporate, is the number of exemptions, the number of tax credits for things like biotech or the research and development, the fact that our manufacturing, our tax structure, our manufacturing is more favorable than Virginia's. They don't get into that. They look at the highest rate, and that's what they do. When we made the change in the sales tax, we went from the 42nd lowest in the country. There were only, I think, 4 that had a lower sales tax than us. The others didn't have any sales tax. Delaware's clever. They take their sales tax out between the wholesaler and the retailer, so you never see it on your receipt, but it's there in the price of the good. So we moved from 42nd to 32nd. I don't think that change made us uncompetitive. In fact, I would argue that that is one of the things that have allowed us to be fiscally responsible, to not only maintain the rudder of the ship of state in these storms, but also to invest in the very assets of the new economy, like education and affordable college and innovation, that enable us to make this change. When we raised the corporate income taxes, we're still lower than Pennsylvania, lower than Delaware, lower than the District of Columbia, and I believe lower than West Virginia, albeit not lower than Virginia. So there are a mix of things that go into making a good business climate. We moved up, let me just rattle off 3 other reports that we can put next to the people that believe it all begins and ends with whatever your highest tax rate is. U.S. Chamber of Commerce named us one of the top 2 states for innovation and entrepreneurship. The Kauffman Foundation and their new economy index looked at which states are best prepared and positioned to make this change in a positive way to the new economy. And they ranked Maryland 3rd among all the states in the new economy index. And then the third and final one, an area where we've shown tremendous leadership over the last 10 years and actually improved our leadership from 4th place among 50 states to 2nd place, was in the area of biotech, where the Milken Institute moved our ranking up from 4th in the nation to 2nd in the nation in terms of life science and biotech, which is why people like CEO of the Year in Montgomery County, Tom Watkins, a registered Republican, very much for O'Malley Brown, believes that this is a great place for his business and for biotech and that whole emerging sector. You're going to see, as NIH and Hopkins and University of Maryland have been for our biotech and life science